The opening to Season 3 of Star Trek The Original Series, Spock's Brain, is widely considered not only one of the worst episodes of all Star Trek, but is also one of the most famous bad episodes of all time. One so ridiculous that Leonard Nimoy was embarrassed by it, and a respected Trek writer used a pseudonym to distance himself from the episode. So, with all of that in mind, I rewatched it with the intention of answering the question, was it that bad? And the answer is yes. I mean, yes, it absolutely is. But there's something about this episode that makes it entertaining, but not in a good way, more like a car crash in slow motion way. So in this video, I'm looking at why Spock's brain fails, what little it actually does well, and whether it really deserves the reputation as the worst Star Trek episode ever made. Spock's brain sees the Enterprise boarded by a mysterious woman who manages to knock out the entire crew of the ship before leaving Spock in sickbay minus his brain, somehow surviving due to his unique Vulcan physiology. Kirk leads a search and rescue mission to get it back, finding it stolen by a primitive civilization who had previously been a highly advanced one before a natural disaster forced them underground. Now, in the end, Spock's brain is restored to his body and all is well. Spock's Brain was directed by Mark Daniels, who had previously directed episodes like Mirror Mirror, A Private Little War, and Space Seed. It was also written by the legendary Gene L. Coon, who had previously written iconic episodes like The Devil in the Dark and A Taste of Armageddon. So, you would assume that in these two's hands, this episode should be good. The thing is, though, Season 3 of Star Trek was a mess. Budget cuts, a short production schedule, and being moved to the dreaded Friday 10 p.m. death slot where nobody was watching. Oh, and Season 3's producer was Fred Freiberger. Freiberger decided that Star Trek was too cerebral for most audiences and decided that it needed more action, more fight scenes, and fewer big ideas. And Spock's Brain feels like a manifesto for this season. Gene L. Coon had originally written a much more serious, though a lot stranger story involving a civilization on an asteroid and Vulcan mental disciplines. Freiberger came in and revised the story outline and was involved in rewrites, thinking, you know what Star Trek fans really want?
Brain and brain! What is brain?
And Coon was so dissatisfied with the final script that he used his pseudonym Lee Cronin to distance himself from it. So let's have a look at the script. One of the main issues of this episode is the script, and a lot can be blamed on Freiberger's rewrites. Alongside Arthur H. Singer, he introduced some of the more absurd elements, such as the teacher machine and some of the iMorg material. To make matters worse, we ended up with some lines that I'm sure these professional actors looked at and said, really? This?
His body lives, the autonomic functions continue. But there is no mind.
On top of that, we have Kirk leading an away team to a primitive planet, breaking the Prime Directive, ironically mentioned in the Season 1 episode, The Return of the Archons, written by Gene L. Coon. Also, can we just talk about how much of a jerk Kirk is to Chekhov on the bridge? The man is filling in for Science Officer, and he's doing his absolute best. And when we get to the point that they want to try and restore Spock's brain, Kirk forces Kara against her will into the teacher device, which really doesn't sit right. And this is just one example of the rampant sexism that exists in this episode, from questioning the men as to where their mates were, reducing women to pure breeding material, to questioning where the men are when they're inside the superstructure, because obviously women couldn't have built this. And lastly, whenever we have had a situation in previous episodes where a computer is ruling a society, such as Return of the Archons or the Apple, usually the computer is evil, and therefore destroying it gives the civilization it rules a chance to flourish on their own. In this episode, despite Spock telling Kirk to leave him, Kirk makes a decision to take away the computer that keeps the people alive because he wants to. Usually, in Star Trek, there would be like a debate followed by like an imaginative solution to fix it all. This time, however, Kirk basically says, I just want my mate back. We even have an early version of the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few from Kara, which falls on deaf ears.
That the need of my people for their controller is greater than your need for your friend.
But as bad as the writing was, the most ridiculous part of this episode wasn't even in the original script. It was a last-minute decision on set. In the original script, Spock's body would have remained on board the Enterprise while the crew searched for his brain. Mark Daniels decided this wasn't interesting enough and came up with the idea that McCoy would remotely control Spock's body. Now, in his book, I Am Spock, Leonard Nimoy recalls that there was little challenge in walking around pretending to be brainless. And in fairness to Nimoy, he's still committed to giving the best performance that he could. He also admitted that he was embarrassed during the shooting of this episode. You and me both, Nimoy. And thankfully, we only had a few scenes of this, as several scenes involving the remote control Spock were cut, including Scotty helping operate Spock's body and Spock being brought to the bridge before beaming down amongst others. Look, I'm just surprised that there wasn't a scene where the remote ran out of batteries, McCoy promised his kids to put fresh ones in, but then just plain forgot, leaving his children really disappointed that they couldn't play with the remote control Spock anymore. Honestly, not a lot. And this comes down to one thing, really. There's literally no point to this story. None. Star Trek is a show that tells stories with a message, championing equality, diversity, as well as how you should treat others. And none of that is in this episode. Just to recap, we have Kirk being a jerk to Chekhov, breaking the Prime Directive, and forcing a woman against her will to do something for his benefit. Oh, and we have remote control Spock. Spock's brain feels like the result of a drunken what-if conversation that just got out of control. I mean, you could argue that in today's world, there is something to be said about a technology that does all of the thinking for a population, resulting in the dumbing down of said population. However, I don't think generative AI was too much of a concern back in the 1960s. Now, with all of that being said, though, is this episode as bad as it's made out to be? It absolutely is. However, in comparison to a lot of other bad Star Trek episodes, there is something fun and campy about this episode that does make it watchable, if in very small doses. It's the over-the-top acting, the bad but highly quotable lines, and the deadpan Spock all the way through. And while I'm not in a rush to rewatch this episode, it's the type that I'd enjoy watching with friends so that we could just laugh at it together. Definitely not watching it for the story, but to see just how bad it gets. Incidentally, Marge Doucet, who played Kara, was unaware that she was infamous for being in this bad episode. She assumed it was beloved, as fans would ask her for autographs from it. So there you have it, my look back at Spock's brain. Tell me, do you think this was the worst Star Trek episode, or is it just campy fun? I do try and read and reply to every comment, so I look forward to seeing your point of view. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, you can check out more of my Star Trek videos here. And if you want to support this channel, please like this video and hit the subscribe button. I'm almost at 2,000 subscribers and I'd love to have you on board. Thanks for watching.